that how powerful self-awareness is. Be accountable for your actions. Pay attention to how you're affecting others, and how you're determining your own fate. It's so many people want to blame the world for their problems and not take accountability.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Bloem, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Crystal, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chef Chrystal Vasquez. I am from Fresno, California. I've been here my entire life. I've worked in the food industry for 20 years now. I've been a certified chef for 13. Food is what I know and what I've become very passionate about. In the last few years, mainly since the pandemic, I can kind of use as a time frame. I really started getting involved in food insecurity. Food access has kind of become a passion of mine. I have now been volunteered in my community, trying to figure out ways to bridge the gaps in the food system in the San Joaquin Valley. I also have worked at places where I got to feed the Senior Meals on Wheels program, the Head Start programs. I just left as the director of an organization that feeds the homeless. So now I'm branching out, doing my own business finally, and the idea is to be able to provide fresh, healthy foods to the community for a quality price. A lot of my soups and salads are farm to table, so I can kind of teach people to appreciate food. I think in my latter years of thinking of leaving this industry, I just felt like once I started finding more purpose in food, I felt more comfortable to stay. So now I'm branching out from being a chef into finding my way into more community service goods and needs, and really just, opening myself up to the possibilities and just looking out towards the world. I think really what happened was I just realized that one person that can make a difference, and I've just been running with that ever since.
Mm. That's a lot of what you've done, and I'm really excited about this because my listeners know this particular podcast is a spin-off of a 100-mile walk that I started to do in 2012, and I started to walk every year 100 miles to raise awareness, about and funds to end hunger, poverty, and injustice. So I'm really passionate about what you're doing as well. But before I have questions about, your restaurant that you opened at the beginning of this year, if I'm not mistaken, and all the other things, you started with, you grew up in Fresno. So when did you then get involved with food? You were small when you started cooking, and how did that happen?
So my journey with food goes back as, I think I'd say about 7, 8. My father got to a point in age where my father thought I was able to handle a stove, I guess. So it was like when I wanted a certain dish, he would pull me in and say, "Okay, I'll show you how to make it, and next time you'll make it yourself." And so it kind of became a thing where I'd cook, dinner once or twice a week, and I just started feeling this passion to feed people. I really enjoyed that. And, I remember being young, like, how's it taste? How this is good? Coming at people and being pleased with them being pleased. And so definitely I saw the emotion that and the cultural bonds and the things that went with it. I just never really thought into it much, right? So it was just something like I did on the weekends. I would host for friends. I would throw barbecues. I'd make little feasts, and I just wanted to feed people, and that's all it really was for a long time. I ended up at working. My first job was at a KFC. I worked fast food, hopped into being a server and a host, well, a hostess and a busser, and then into a server. I've worked pretty much every angle now of the food industry. So I started front of house. I said I was never going to go back. I went into like a over the phone technical support thing I did for about a year and a half. And then I was, going to community college and just kind of taking my general ed, not knowing where I was going to go with it. I don't even remember if I had a goal. I know when I was in high school, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And I wanted to I go to the Amazon and find, cures for cancer. That was my thing.
Mm.
And so, I still kind of want like on that same journey, I think in essence. Um, I so I then ended up needing a ride. I remember it was in my 20s and I was kind of in a place of desperation. And my friend and her cousin-in-law, whatever, sister-in-law, they were enrolling. One had gone to culinary school and was going back to get do the full term program, and the other one was just getting started. And I needed that ride somewhere afterwards. So I went with them, and they talked me into culinary school. I said, this is going to be a short term goal. I am just need something, I need something. And, I don't think I took it very serious the first month or two or first module or two. I think about the third module, I just something clicked and I was
Mm.
like, I like this. And then from then on, I was serious. And I remember the culinary. I had one culinary teacher for about half of my mods, the way it worked out in the evening classes. And he saw that
Mm.
initiative change, because I remember, I'll never forget the time we were in baking was one of the first courses, and we're standing in front of the stove and all of the burners are on. And I'm like, man, it's really hot. And he comes in and he turns them all on high and he walks off. He says, get used to it. And so, and at that time, I really was still that little hard headed kid I grew up being. And so when it switched, nobody really believed in me. I didn't know what I was doing yet. I just kind of, I knew that I had an opportunity because I already had so much restaurant experience. By that time, I had 7 or 8 years. And I just hopped in the back, no problem. I remember a lot of places were making me do the running and doing because I had that multi-skill to deal with the customers, which a lot of cooks that they avoid. So
Mhm.
and I try to now too as much as possible. Which is funny because now my business I can't. But yeah, so my journey went on. I remember being in my early 20s, cooking in multiple kitchens all over the city. I was hard-headed. I didn't want to stay anywhere long. I wanted to learn as much as possibly could. And if I couldn't move up, I moved down. And
Mhm.
so, the restaurant industry's got a high turnover. It's a nitty-gritty place. You're not always going to find a very comfortable work environment, especially as a female. And there's definitely I've had to put up with a lot.
Mm.
It took me a long time to get to start managing kitchens. I think I was about 5 or 6 years in, which is takes some people a lot more time because I had that, like I said, I had that overall aspect of the restaurant industry. Um, there were several times I wanted to run away and leave the industry. I went back to school in 2018
Mhm.
to study culinology, food science, and nutrition because I believe in the concepts of healing through food. This was
Okay.
when I was still very early on. And then that's kind of where I stumbled upon the definition of food insecurity,
Mhm.
food deserts. And I just started looking at statistics and I was so baffled. And that's kind of where my motion changed, being in the Central Valley. I heard stories of my father and my aunts and my tias and my tios like talking about picking grapes in the fields when they were kids, and
Mhm.
it's kind of one of the things I think my father left a big legacy of working hard. He always worked really hard, and so like that, those were stories I kind of heard. It was like, oh, the walking to school in the snow kind of stories, right?
Yeah.
And so those kind of things like that. My father grew up poor, and um, from then he went to the Navy, tried to pick up a life for himself, and then ended up getting married afterwards. He had me later in life, and he's kind of was that wisdom, that old soul that really. I mean, he's still here, but yeah, that led me kind of on this journey without knowing it, I guess. my dream is really to work on, like I said, food access. So I have ideas now that I've come up with that I want to implement here in the Valley.
Hmm.
So something I haven't mentioned is that when I started getting involved in this, I had some ideas, some community projects basically. And I'm, as chef, no idea what I'm talking about really. I've just got these good ideas, like some simple solutions. So I start reaching out to people all over the county, all over different organizations, different CBOs. I mean, the health department. Somehow I got led into a Zoom for Fresno Metro Ministries. They were creating work groups to create the Food Policy Council of Fresno County,
Hmm.
which is still in order. They're still working on, the development of that. But 2 years in, I did a lot of research. I had a lot of free time. I was going to school full time when I first started. So I participated in every work group, and I
Hmm.
learned so much along the way. I ended up kind of branching out more into community needs and stuff. So like I volunteer on my city council review committee for my district. I did the work for the kind of that development stages for Fresno Metro, and that's where that passion really grew for food in a different manner. Finding out that the San Joaquin Valley is second lowest in food security in the nation just baffled me, and I couldn't. I had to figure out why. Like, why is this happening? We are the breadbasket of the world, yet we are one of the most starving people. Cities, counties, really, and so you look at it, and it's like the people that process these foods and handle them hardly have enough food for their own families. So it's a devastating factor, which really opened my mind to the food systems and
Hmm.
how broken they are. I say broken, people kind of I think they did tear from that word because it's almost offensive, but and that's kind of where we're at. Our systems are have failed and they're continuing to fail us. And so I think I see myself just doing whatever I can, whether it's my spicy meatball, where I raise enough capital to create food hubs and promote food co-ops and in food deserts in the San Joaquin Valley, or beyond. I'm ready to go.
Hmm.
I want to make a difference. I love cooking. I love being a chef. That's always a passion of mine that I will enjoy. I love like doing the caterings, and I have a lot of creativity to me. So like I like interior decorating and gardening and kind of those little
Hmm.
miscellaneous things that allow me to do great event planning. So it's kind of versatile. So I enjoy all those things. I think that will never leave. But I really have a dream of feeding a starving nation, and that's kind of how can I get there? I mean, I don't know how I can even feed my county yet, but I want to help out however I can. So for now, it's the spicy meatball. It's that I'm doing my favorite pastas that I like to make with my, signature sauces, and then I'm doing my spicy meatball and meatball sandwiches. This is one of those other spontaneous whim things, kind of like
Hmm.
culinary school. It was close. I came to somebody in the small business, the small business administration, and was asking for help about creating my food hub. And he told me I needed the guy that was helping me told me I needed to create a revenue source. And I'm like, well, I'll get grants. I even took a grant writing course at Fresno State and some other things to kind of equip me to live out these goals. And he's, you still need one. And so we got stuck for a second, and I started telling him about my chef career because he knew nothing about me. And he's, what, brand yourself, he told me. You're the revenue. He's like, you know what you're doing. You have this part down. He's like, do this. And to me, I laughed. I'm like, I'm more humble than that. I don't see myself on a line of seasonings, in the store or something. But and that's the kind of thing he was pitching to me. So I left, and I told him I wasn't, I'm like, nah, I'll think about it. I'm not really keen to this. I had an interview to be the head of executive chef of the entire school district in this area, which is huge. They turned me down, and I think I just was like so expected to get it. And at that point, I was like, "What do you have left, Crystal?" Because you don't want to go work in, I can go work in a restaurant. I'm sure I can work my way up or start off as an executive chef in a restaurant. But to me, there's, I want more purpose and meaning behind what I do, and I want to help people. And to me, it's becoming not just what's on that plate, it's that the whole aspect that goes around that meal. So I came to a place of different desperation, and I was starting to sell food. I ended up selling food out of chafing dishes in the back of my car. Don't tell anybody. I mean, everybody's listening, but it was a one-time event, and it scared the crap out of me. And to me, it was like, this is what your career has gotten you, right? After all these years.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day, I called the guy back from the Small Business Bureau and I said, okay, let's do this. How do I get this done? Because I'm never doing this again. I can't live this on my conscience. This is not how I prepare food, and this is not how I sell it. This is not me. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. So, he led me some steps, and here I am a few months later. And I took last week off for the holidays, but my first week was before that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a journey. It's gonna be a journey. I'm hoping the spicy meatball is only gonna be, 3 to 5 year project, and
Mm-hmm.
but something that will live on through my children. I have my oldest is in the Air Force right now, but my middle child is 16, and I feel like this is something that he would want to take on, and and I'm hoping that he will. And then that still creates that revenue stream that I can have to
Mm-hmm.
work on the food hubs and have that grow. So, the journey is endless in food, and I think after spending so many years confined to, the industry, I mean, don't get me wrong, I worked in hospitals, I worked at colleges, I worked in hotels, it wasn't just restaurants, but um, it, to me, it's like I'm seeing such a larger picture, and I want to make a difference in a larger scale. So I'm running with that. I am also on the board of directors for gogreenlocally.org, which is
Mm-hmm.
based on sustainability and community. So from there, I've been able to help kind of create an action plan, just going off of my experiences and how can you help community through food access kind of thing. So I mean, I haven't got to do as much as I would like, but I try to give myself credit for the little that I have done. So.
Yeah, I think when I looked at your bio that you sent, you have done a lot. I would like to take a couple of steps back to really understand. The first question that I have for you is, so was your dad also in the culinary business or not at all?
No, my father worked at the post office when he got out
Okay.
of
So you're the
the
first in your family that goes in this direction.
yeah, I guess when his story as I recall was
Hmm.
his father told him you sign up for the one you want or they're going to take you for whatever they're going to take you for. So he was like, well, I want to go in the Navy then. So he just joined, I think, because out of fear of being recruited into something he didn't want to do. And so then, from there he got out and he got a job at the post office. He retired from the post office when I was in high school. He was, like I said, he was older when he had me. I think he was 38. So he's always kind of been on that. The others, where my
Hmm.
mother was 12 years younger. And so there was this huge generational gap between them. And I think I just some things came from mom and then some things came from
Hmm.
dad and the cooking came from him. And I remember like when I first started, he would come to me with his recipes. Look, I tried this, I did that. And now I can't get him up to do anything much these days, but I cook for him. He has it made. So but like I said, that's something I'll never forget. And that's kind of something I with my kids too. A lot of the moralism that I did get wasn't a lot that I was raised with, but I I try to pass those things on, that
Hmm.
those old generational things that our society is missing today. So definitely a
Yeah.
lot of those moralisms come from him.
I mean, when I was listening to you, when you were studying and you found out that there are these food deserts and a lot of people don't have food access, not every chef would say, okay, now I become a community development person, an activist as well. So where did that come from?
Couple different things. I definitely think realizing that I had gone through and my children had gone through food insecurity for a majority of our lives was really shocking. I guess I just never had a word for it. I'd been through it and I felt it. I felt it in my core. And I still do, obviously. Also in 2019, I lost my son to SIDS. He was 6 weeks old. Uh,
So sorry.
and my heart needed something. It needed healing. I needed hope. I went to church more. I got more involved. Um, but I needed more purpose in that. And so I think it just like was just the right thing at the right time. That really spoke to my heart. That and then that I'm an empath, obviously. And that always wanting to help others and always do more for others, but not knowing how. Being a single mother for a majority of my life, I barely could provide. I had my first child when I was 13. So I grew up with my first one. I didn't know what I was feeding him right from wrong after the age of 5. Luckily, I had parenting classes and the daycare at the school to teach me some of those things. But I think it was until he was in his teens that he was like, "Mom, I don't want to eat this crappy food." Something I didn't think I really mentioned was I was always raised on the dinners were always a protein. My father found out he was diabetic when I was really young, and so it was always a protein and a box of something and a can of something, and that was our meals. And when I got to culinary school, there were so many things I didn't know how to cook. I didn't realize I didn't know because I had a pastaroni and I had a rice aroni. I had these things, and I didn't realize these nutritional things. When I think something clicked in my head because I was going to school, right, for this healing through food, but I really didn't understand so much. I'd taken a nutrition course in culinary school, but it wasn't the same as in community college. I think when I took it and I realized the importance of food and the effects of ultra processed foods, I was just baffled, and it was kind of just like it all hit me at once. I remember when I was taking that nutrition course, I was also taking an early childhood development and an education and nutrition course at the same time. And I think that's kind of where those two definitions kind of came in. Um, I had, participated in the daycare at high school all 4 years. I and then afterwards in my children's classrooms, my niece's daycare. My mother was a student teacher in my classroom when I was a kid. So I think it kind of like carried on. I've been a mother most of my life. So I think it just really touched me a lot. And I could just, it's like my brain just something clicked and all these endless possibilities just like came to mind. I think I'm natural problem solver. I have ADHD, so my brain like automatically comes up with like 10 solutions for every problem. And then I have to like compute them out and figure out which one's the best. But it's something that like when I started participating in these work groups, I just, well, why don't we do this? How come we aren't doing this? Why? They're like, everyone's looking at me like, well, yeah, you make it sound so simple. And I'm like, obviously, I didn't know any of the logistics of it, any of the things that I was saying, but something that I realized when I started going to those meetings, because I'll tell you, the first time I showed up in one of those Zooms, I didn't want to get back in one ever again. These people just looking at me like, what is she doing here? Who gave her this invite? I'm with the head of the head of the city planning. I'm in the head of the health department and the account
Why
branch.
did they ask you? Why did they ask you to be
Because I
part of
told
it?
them at the time what I wanted to do, and I still would love to do something like this or see it done, is create a multi-resource community center, kind of somewhere where you could go in, and this is where I say it clicked in my head.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like, well, why don't we create a place where people can go, they can get evaluated, do a physical, meet with the dietitian, make a dietary plan, go into a free gym, learn how to use the equipment and how to work
Mhm.
out at home, have a small community garden in that area. People can learn to cultivate and grow, and a small demo kitchen where you can teach people how to make healthy, fresh foods and make them tasteful. And so that was the idea that I was calling everybody in the city about. And so they're like, okay, well, she's got some decent ideas. She's definitely
Mm.
passionate about this. And yeah, so I think I intrigued somebody enough to where they're like,
Okay.
okay,
Yeah.
she can come in. But everybody else is like, I remember I stepped out at one point for a couple months when I started at EOC. When I hopped back in, the head of this one of the organizations here, and she's also like head of the one of the board members for the school district. And she's like, who are you again? I'm like, oh, I'm just a local chef, you know.
Mm.
And there have those moments where I let that feeling get to me, like I'm just a chef. But I think, like I said, that problem solving, that ability to want to help others, that drive to see change, it just fuels me. And I think people catch it every once in a while.
Mhm.
Most people think I'm just ranting on, and like, half of my friends don't want to hear about food security or food access or regenerative agriculture, whatever, whatever little, passionate things that I talk about. But I always say I'll find my people. Eventually, I'll find my people,
Yeah.
and I'll be in the right environment to make that change. So for now, I just keep going.
Yeah. So, I mean, just, for the listeners, I think if I have this right, while you were participating in those working groups, you were also the executive chef, right, of the Fresno
Yes,
Economic
yes,
Opportunities Commission. So you had 50 staff, and you were feeding
yeah.
how many people?
3,500, I believe it was a weekly, or 8,000 weekly, 3,500 a day or something like that,
Yeah.
roughly. Oh,
So that's
yeah,
that's pretty amazing. So you
yeah.
had something
And
to
I was going to school
tell
full
and
time, and
experience,
I
and
was,
yeah.
yeah. So
You,
there was a time I was on overload for sure a few times. I just did my oath again and got put back into the committee that I'm on for
Mhm.
my my city council. And um I'm like, okay, well, right now your life is, it's about to get rocky again, because the business is starting. I can see it. Even the founder of Go Green Locally, she's like, Crystal, you can hop out anytime. I don't want you to go on overload. I tend to, with the ADHD, like to find myself busy and using every moment as productive as
Mhm.
possible. And that's a gift and a curse. So, I have to find my time for rest as well.
Yeah.
But I,
So
I
you,
get I get fulfilled by helping community.
mm,
There's something, that sparks and keeps me going and thriving. And I wish that everybody would open themselves up to that, because um when I was at the Pavarella house, and people were coming in to volunteer and stuff, I made a joke, and I guess they hadn't heard it before, but it was like people come in to get their fix, their volunteer fix, because it makes them feel good about themselves. And it's no joke, it really is. It makes you feel liberated. It really does. I mean, there's much more purpose behind that, but I see why people do it often,
mhm.
and so I also volunteered in a lot of different other little things too, the downtown association, or there's multiple things, the Feeding Fresno does the food distributions at my church, just anything that I possibly can. If I have a free moment and somebody asks for help, I'll be there.
Mm.
When my son was attending, I did the youth on Wednesday, every Wednesday. So I was doing church like 3 times a week a couple like 2 years ago. During all that time that you're mentioning, I was also doing that. So I mean, my days were never ending, and it's unfortunate because I really enjoyed that at that place, but I could not get up at 4 o'clock every morning and not end till 10 o'clock at night. I was depleting myself. So I was
Yeah.
glad that I was able to find the Pavarello.
Mm. And just for our listeners, that is, you stopped working at Fresno EOC in January 2023, and then you started working at the
The
Poverello House,
Pavarello,
right?
yes.
And but then you also have your own restaurant. Do I get
No,
that
so
correct?
yeah, the little because the restaurant didn't come until June or July.
Oh.
So it was the first 6 months that I was at the Poverello. I was hired, contracted into them.
Mhm.
It was so weird for that one, it was just meant to be, I guess, at the moment. They really needed somebody. The chef that they had before
Mhm.
was had been out for a long time on a medical leave, and it looked like it maybe go longer and extend. So they were losing quality, they were losing structure, they needed a chef. And the organization wasn't able to afford one before, like you know, certified,
Mhm.
experienced.
Yeah.
But I guess I had applied for a job there that had nothing to do with food. Actually, I applied. I knew who the chef was, and I didn't know, the details, but I didn't even bother. They didn't have it posted up or anything. I applied for like a shelter associate or something that helps people find housing. And the CEO emailed me back and he said, I see that you applied for this position, but I also see that you're a chef and we are looking for somebody. Would you like to come in and talk about it? I said, well, actually, I'm already signed up to volunteer this week, so I will be there already. And so we met, and
Mm.
he told me what they were looking for and what they needed, and it worked out perfect. They just needed somebody to build that structure, to increase the quality of food, give them the training that they needed. And I was able to do that in a very short amount of time for them. And it came in a perfect essence where they're actually opening a sit down restaurant that will be free to the public. So it's come in, instead of coming in, standing in line and getting a meal, you're going to sit down and get treated like a restaurant. So I was able to get them all a way up into that point, to where now we're waiting on construction. We're just building those habits, the development. I was able to create cycle menus for them where
Mhm.
they can still have a variety of meals, but it's not so repetitive. It was, every 3 weeks it would start over. So you have a different meal for every day. I also made sure that when I was creating that, I was putting in cuisines and dishes from all over the world. I think it was really important that, these people need something. And I remember when I got there, the staff that they did have were like, what is a garnish? Why are you putting that on the plate? They don't care. And it's like, when I got there, it's not that, and the food wasn't terrible when I
Mm.
got there. I have to say that. I have nothing bad to say about the Poverello at all. But I think there was like this, I mean, even when I was in culinary school, it was like, don't mess up, don't miss too much school. You're gonna get your internship at the Poverello. It's like somewhere you didn't want to go cook, right? And they
Mm.
just has this huge stigma. And I think I was able to break that. People were standing in line to come and get food, and they were pushing their plate away and angry. And it changed. It went to people's faces lighting up and them thanking everybody and saying
Mm.
how much they loved the last, this meal or that meal, or when you're going to make that again. And I think they just started to feel appreciated and something to look forward to,
Mhm.
And it's hard because, my mother is now homeless and living on the streets for a majority of the time and choosing that lifestyle. And she would come in and get food while I was working and stuff. Um, the people, I'd never told anybody that when I started working there. So I think when it happened, people, obviously they think the boss is like, stuck up or whatever. And then they saw that humility, for me to go out and talk to her. And so sorry, you guys, that was my mother, and see, I'm a human. I've not had an easy life at all. And that has made me persevere and made me so strong and unstoppable in essence, I guess. And I'm determined for sure. So, um, I wanted to put that love into that food, that like it was my family, because it was my family.
Mm.
So I was able to give that touch to them. So I'm really happy that I was able to do that. And I I'm sad to leave somewhere like that where I have meaning, but I have to also start working on what I want to do because
Mm.
I can only press another organization to live out my dreams so far, right? It's not going to ever be
Yeah.
until I do this myself. So,
Mm. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And and so around the summer, you started your own
Yes. So yeah,
restaurant. So yeah, what do you hope? Because you gave us in the beginning a quick, about your magic a dish, your main dish, and what do you dream of? Where do you hope ultimately your restaurant will go? Because you would like to go national, global. What do you see?
I see the spicy meatball being something that is inside of my food hub. So
Mhm.
the food co-ops that I want to create, so the idea that I have that will kind of fill these gaps in the system creates a network, which there are ways and people that are working on it, of far to the farmers to the people directly. Because one of the huge things that we found in the gaps in the system here in the valley is that even though this food is grown in our backyards, it is being transported out of the Central Valley and then sold and brought back. And then we're paying delivery fees on top of it. So we're paying twice, almost sometimes twice as much for the same food that we if we just bought directly. Um, so that it would eliminate that, and which would also help with the air, but it would also lower the prices. And then once it builds a huge community network, and that's where my centralized hub would be, then I can start promoting food co-ops in smaller areas where I provide them the warehouse that would provide them a meeting space to have community meetings and really plan and develop their own food co-ops and then distribute that food out. I see the spicy meatball being in the food co-ops as that hot. I saw this place that just recently came out. I do a lot of research on these things, so I loved it. It was you could pay for it with your food stamps, but it was a hot meal, and so it was you buy the ingredients, the fresh ingredients, and then you give them to them, and in return they give you a hot meal. So it was like this loophole that they kind of found to be able to provide healthy, fresh food to people that they can eat then. So I see something like that happening where the spicy meatball is that where you can get that. I just read in a article, I want to say with the inflation that's happening with food right now, people the first thing to go is when they're shopping for food, regardless, is going to be that fresh produce. And so we've already got another thing that I read that was baffling was we already have, I think it's like there's I think less than 10% of food industry our food retailers have enough fresh food to sustain a healthy diet. So most places, and then the others, most of them don't even have anything fresh or unprocessed. So the options of having a good meal that you don't cook at home is either outrageous or hard or just completely unavailable to most people. So I know being a cook sometimes through my years I wanted to come home and not cook again. I cooked all day,
Mhm.
and on my in during catering season, or the holidays, we get so busy that we don't have time or we're too exhausted. And I know that it's not just the food industry. That's so many people that have to resort to these cheap quick meals for the families because of, well, and then with all the cost of living increasing so rapidly, people don't have they're picking up extra hours on top of it, right?
Mm.
So it's like we need to find this balance. And so that's why I think the spicy meatball, the way I came up with it was to be able to provide that those meals. So something that besides the food pop-up where I'll have my basic meals, I'll have that catering service available, but I'll also have available these options to do family meals where you pre-order your family meals and then they're just dropped off, and you can either set up a whole week's worth, or you can pick a day of the week that you want to just get one meal, kind of giving that variety to people, and at that cost, because I'm not, yes, obviously I want to sustain myself and my business, but I also want to help people. And if I can't do that and all that I dream of right now, what I can do is provide them a tasty meal that is health and nutrient dense and tasty. It's just like, I think the stigma it drives me nuts. Like people think, oh, healthy, it doesn't taste good. It's like, where did you get this idea? I would love to change that.
I always, as I mentioned to you, this podcast is a spin-off of my 100-mile walk. So I always had a question also about, um, what would make you to walk 100 miles, or which course? Well, that's very clear. You have made it clear to me why you would walk 100 mile. But when I'm doing my 100-mile walk, I'm sometimes accompanied by others, and we talk about life, what drives us, and etc. And very often we talk about religion and spirituality as well. And it probably has to do something with walking, that you ask yourself the question, well, why am I here? So I have a question for you in terms of youth and religion and spirituality. Because a lot of my guests are saying, oh, the younger generation, they are different. They don't have religion, or if they have a religion, they don't go to church, or they are spiritual, and some are saying no. What do you see in your community, among the youth, in terms of religion and spirituality? Because I heard
So
you say, you go to church,
yeah,
right? So that's
yeah.
important
I
for
do go
you.
to
Yeah.
church, and for about a year, I was helping in the youth program at church as
Mm,
well. So every Wednesday we'd go and do that with the kids. And well, my son would go hang out, and me and my daughter would just help out however we could.
yeah.
It was a way for me to help build a relationship with my son, and try to understand the youth a little bit better.
Mm,
And I could see that we were separating, and I had no idea how to get us back on path. And I have to say, I think that there's two things. There's a huge desperation for purpose and meaning and to feel love from the youth. And then there's this huge uh, fear of being judged for believing. And when you combine those two, it leaves kids so confused they don't know what to do.
mm,
They're being told that they can find sense and purpose and feel loved by their creator, and then their friends and family are laughing at them because they say they believe in God. So I think there there's many that want to find a relationship or find meaning in life and spirituality in general. I think they just don't know how, and they don't feel like they feel like they're alone in it, so they just stray from it, and it's sad because um for me as a youth, I my father was raised Jehovah Witness, my mother was raised Mormon, and I found Christianity through my mom's sobriety. One of the times she had came back home, she dragged me into church with my best friend since second
mm,
grade. Her mother took my mother to another church, and um, I went on Wednesdays to Awana, at which we played games and learned Bible verses for money, and that sustained me until my 20s when I started stepping into church again. Just those Bibles verses that I remembered as a kid. So I have hope for kids. I really do. I think if you can reach them and they can believe for just a moment, that there's hope for them. I think there's too much in this world that's keeping them and censoring them from God or religion. And the focus just has to shift. More kids should know that they can make a difference and help somebody else out by just stating what they believe. It's kind of how I got here and this far in my journey, is just stating what I believe, what's right from wrong, and finding those things and standing with them. So I think the youth has hope, and I think that the way that the world is just so many catastrophes after another, especially with climate change and climate disasters, that there's a fear that's being built in people in general, that the youth are going to need something. And hopefully, I really hope that they find that in religion, because if you go to the world today, they're really, there's hard to find hope other places, and that's just the reality.
mm. Okay.
So I think it goes back to that kind of looking into that inner development that
Hmm.
you were you had sent me, and
Hmm.
going in and reading that. It's like the children need to, there's more that we need to focus on establishing in our youth before we send them out into the world,
Hmm.
like understanding their feelings and understanding their beliefs and what they, there's just too many things that have gone to the wayside that are so important in development of a good human being in
Yeah.
general. So
Mm. I would like to piggyback on what you just said, because I do send the link to the inner development goals to all my guests before we talk, because for me, it is related with the sustainable development goals, and the sustainable development goals are those 17 goals that the world came up with to make our world more sustainable. And SDG 2, sustainable development goal number 2, is end hunger, something that you're working on, and you are talking about, the food system has to change. And, the SDGs are about that, about system changes that need to happen. But, this growing group of people said, one of the reasons that we are not getting there is because we never paid attention to the abilities, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as a community to really help to change those systems. So, and therefore they come up with the inner development goals. So I ask everybody of my guests to look into that. So what were you thinking when you read that? Were you familiar already with the inner development goals?
I was, but not in that detail, obviously
Okay.
not in that perspective.
Yeah.
um it was kind of enlightening to me because it's something that I've really been doing myself in the last few
Hmm.
years, ever since my son's passing. It's just like I got in my Bible and I started reading about myself. And I said, all your life, Crystal, you thought you were this amazing person, but you're just as flawed as everyone else. And I had to go back and start changing some habits and some behaviors, and um, really stemming to the root of why I am the way I am. And I think I kind of talked about this in a webinar where we were discussing childhood ACEs, and I we were talking about, they was with a bunch of social workers, and they were just talking about identifying children and ACEs, and traumas that they've been through, and numbering them. And it kind of irked me at a certain point where I was like, okay, so you're numbering children by their traumatic events that they've been through. What are you doing to make a difference? What are you? Was there any point that you stop and tell these parents, hey, I know that you were raised being hit, but that doesn't mean it's okay to hit your children. Things like this is, when do we stop and we work on these issues? And it's the same with like therapy. It's like, these are things that we should be teaching children immediately. Every time a child gets in a fight, or a child loses a family member, or any of those things, those are those where we stop and we ask them, how does that make you feel? And heal those moments now, so they don't become these detrimental impacts on their future or their lives, where they hate the world or the people in it or whatever it may be, right? These damages that these scar tissues continue to build and deter people. And I think if we could just kind of, it's like it said in the video, it's hard to teach old dog new tricks, right? But if we start with the youth, we give ourselves a starting point. It's the same thing that we said with about nutritional eating in these work groups. Is if a child brings home a food and says, and their parents have never seen it, they're going to try it. If their kid is asking them to try something, they're going to try it. Or if they're at a grocery store and the kid says, hey mom, I want to try a kiwi, I've never had this, you never buy these, the parents are going to try it too, right? So it's kind of this inner way to not only building a new future and kind of giving us a fresh start, but it kind of interplants these seeds into the adults as well. And that gives that hope that maybe we can make a difference that way, because uh, we're stuck in our ways, and that's very apparent. And nobody wants to be told what to do or how to do it anymore. And so it seems like it's nobody's listening. And I think if we can start building those skills in our children, through just building curriculum around it, like, how do I think I had made a post once that was like, we teach children to treat each other with respect, but when do we teach? I wish they would have taught us that about the earth. We need to reciprocate back to the earth as much as we take from it. And we obviously are in the situation because we haven't. We need to be more self-conscious of what we're doing and every impact of, it's like nothing's for free. Oh, I got this for free. No, somebody paid a price along the way,
Mm.
regardless if it was a human or an animal or a plant or, something that wasn't given back. And 95% of the time, anything that's been industrialized or produced through industrialism has never given anything back. And so, I have my concepts about that too, but I think it's holding people accountable, and until we actually do, people aren't going to change those things on their own. So that's why I feel like the hope of building these developmental skills we can find in the younger generations,
Mm.
and hope that they can spread into the older. But trying to start with the parents and get them to influence their children, it's not going to work that way.
It's a lot about connecting, right? You just
Mm-hmm.
talked about connecting or reconnecting, the elderly with younger, with the youth. I'm so happy we were finally able to connect, although we were connected on LinkedIn, but we never had spoken with each other. What I hope this podcast is also doing is that I connect you with listeners, or I connect you with my previous guests. So I came up with asking my guests how to come up with a question for my next guest. So my previous guest has a question for you. And the question for you is,
Yeah, I am curious if there's a lesson from a book or something that you read recently that seemed to have direct relevancy to something you were trying to achieve, and what was the lesson that you learned?
I think I kind of talked about that a little bit already,
Mhm.
kind of in that direct way. I think something that I read more recently that really stuck with me, and just kind of about these tipping points, reading about
Mhm.
this. We're now at a two degrees Celsius, and our oceans, and here's another tipping point that we've hit, and nobody wants to listen. It's kind of like watching everybody ignore the world ending. It's like, are we really here? Nobody's just, either they just don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to feel like they're accountable. Or I think I read, that something that stuck with me was that scientists no longer can determine our future. And when I read that, I was baffled, because I think my whole life it was like, we trusted what the weatherman said when we were kids. Or we we could look ahead and know that, okay, it's gonna rain the next week. But just finding that the future is unknown from the people that are the ones that have always told us the future, I kind of just opens my mind, and I just wonder, like, when are people gonna really wake up and start making those changes individually so that we can all survive. And I think it just stuck with me. So I think it made me feel like I needed to do more, and I have no idea how.
Mm.
I try to do as much, obviously, as I possibly can, but I'm willing to do more. I just don't know how, And I think when I went through that process in my head, I thought about how many people don't know. They want to make a change, they want to help, but they don't know how. And I think that just shows us that we have a long way to go with a very little bit of time. So we it's it's got to be a group effort, And I just pray for the world and the people in it, and just hope that we can come to, our senses, and start reciprocating back to the world what we've taken from it, and hope that we can, make a future for the rest of the way. 'Cause
Mm. I assume when people come to your restaurant and they see that ultimately your hope to give part of the proceeds, the earnings back to a community in need, they will ask you questions, I guess, why you do that and where it's going, right? So
yeah.
that's a direct yeah, I think that's definitely not. I think I for sure this is definitely changing the world and the way we look at things, and it's one person at a time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, any your question for the next guest?
For me, I know I have my moments where I do find that balance between work and home life, you know, conflicting. Just kind of what maybe something along the lines like how to, what made you most successful in your most pressing moments where you had to put that balance in where work was pressing everything out of you, home was pressing out of you. What kind of techniques and interpersonal skills did you use to kind of get through those things?
In the US, either until recently or maybe he's still doing this, Steve Hartman of CBS was looking at one simple act of kindness and the potential to create a ripple effect. And I have two questions to you about this. Is one, what do you think about the potential of a small act of kindness in terms of the potential of causing a ripple effect? And then the second question I have is if I would ask you now, right now on the spot, to commit to one simple act of kindness this week, this coming week, what would you do?
Calling a friend and like yesterday I did somebody called me and I was busy, but I called back anyways and I could tell that she needed me and I kind of dismissed it a little and then I called her back again and I'm like, okay, I have my focus on you now. How can I help you? What do you need from me? Do you need me to listen? Do you need my time? I can adjust my schedule. Random act of kindness is just letting somebody know that you care or like listen is one of the easiest things that people you can do for somebody that it just literally takes maybe a couple minutes of your time. You don't have to actually give anything, but your listening ear and maybe some strong words of encouragement, but it just comes naturally now at a certain point for me. But that's just something I try to do. So, and then the other one was, does it have a ripple effect? Absolutely, absolutely. People don't. You can change somebody's entire life by opening a door for them. Um, I've seen it where somebody's heart completely changes just by somebody handing them $1 or giving them a ride. Look at what happened to me. Somebody gave me a ride and look at where I'm at now. So that it really can make a difference.
Hey, music is very important to me, so I always ask a question about music as well. If I would ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that embodies for a big part what you are about, which piece of music or song would that be and why?
I saw this question and I just got stuck. I
The most difficult question according to my guests. So
well, I like the Beatles. All You Need Is Love is something I was showing my daughter the other day. It goes back to my father's music, but and listening to it and just it's like the world is just in desperate need of being loved. It's like the world itself, the people in it. And I think for me, it was a hard question because I for the last 7 years or so, I've listened to nothing but Christian music, so in all kinds of genres. But I was like, nobody's gonna really know. There's a song that's called "New Wine" by a few different people sing it, tribal music or Hillsong. But it's just kind of it says in it, make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. And it's kind of I listen to it all the time because I just want to be a purpose and help others and live out a path right by God and make a difference in this world. So that would probably be it.
Yeah. And the title was a new
New wine. It's
new
make
wine.
me a
Okay.
new, yeah, because it's make me a new wine. So it's
Make me a
like
new one. Okay.
renew me. Yeah.
And I'm sure we can add that to the I made a special Spotify playlist. If you search for #Walk Talk Listen, you see all the songs that have been selected by my guests, and that is from gospel to hard rock, jazz, to name it. It's all there. I think it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it's hard. I love music and all genres, so I'm really into music a lot. So that's like a really hard question for me for some reason. The rest I was like, I'll wing it, but that one I didn't know.
Yeah,
I was like, maybe it'll just come to me last minute.
and it did. These conversations always go fast. Any last message, invitation, or question for the listeners from you?
I think when I was reading through your interview questions,
Mhm.
it was something, when you were asking about, the sustainable goals and the inner development goals is self-awareness. I think people that was, one of those things like what would you want people to know? And
Mhm.
it's just that how powerful self-awareness is. Be accountable for your actions. Pay attention to how you're affecting others. And how you're determining your own fate. It's so many people want to blame the world for their problems and not take accountability. And I know with my experience of looking back in my life, when I got to EOC, um, is when all this kind of really started, the self-development at least. I had come into a place in my life where I finally had some contentment and some, safety net where I felt, life was going okay. And that it was the first time where I didn't have to live in survival mode. And I remember looking back and like it seemed to me like my life had been like a triathlon. I'd been running around these circles and heaping over these hurdles and never looking back. I didn't have time. I just got to keep going. And then I got to a place where I was able to look back. And once I did, I almost broke me. There was so many things I hadn't healed from. I never had time to. I just had to keep going. I think that we all do that in essence. And with it one thing or everything. But those things, if we don't take the time to go back and heal ourselves, broken people break people too. So be aware, just be aware of who you are and the impacts you're making. Because some may seem minor, but like if we go back to that ripple effect, you never know how badly, you know, isn't it? And I don't mean just in our actions and our behaviors, but in our purchases
Mhm.
and our routines. There's a lot of things that we do that affect others that we just simply don't even pay attention to.
Right. Thank you so much, Crystal. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure people are really curious now about everything you do. So we make sure that we put your website on the podcast now so they can find you. Yeah. Any question that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, I think, I'm an open book. I kind of just spiel off information regardless if it's necessary or not. It goes back to that ADHD. So I think, I'm usually pretty good about filling in all the mysterious gaps. I don't really leave out much detail. So I do if people are interested in, asking more questions or learning more, just hearing the ideas that I have, whatever. Like I said, I don't have a huge community of people that believe in the things that I do in my day-to-day life. So I'm all about, connecting and learning more from others. So
Right. Yes, thank you so much for
yes.
everything you do and for who you are. It's really, yeah, great.
Oh, thank you so
Wish you
much
all
for
the
having
best.
me. I really appreciate it. I was very nervous. I'm glad I was able to
You did
accomplish it.
wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.